Hello, my name is Eileen Ortiz Luis de Ogracias. I am the daughter of Melania Salonga and Leon Ortiz Luis III. I'm also the granddaughter of Remedios de Leon Salonga and Victorina Salonga, and I am a descendant of the De Leon Ortiz Luis and Salonga families of Cabiao, Nueva Ecija. When I think about the De Leon family, I do not first think about family trees, church records, or historical documents. I think about family. I think about the reunions. I think about all the lolas and lolas, titos and titas, and what seemed like an endless number of cousins gathered together in one place. I think about Lola Felisa and her famous kare-kare, menudo, and chicken pastel. I think about our annual Black Saturday family reunion, not by the river, but in the river. And here's proof. I remember long tables covered with food under makeshift tents while everyone sat in the water eating together. There was laughter, storytelling, swimming, and enough food to feed an army. That's my Lola Vic, and he's the one kind of responsible for putting this all together. He and my Lola Remy hosted this annual Black Saturday De Leon reunion in the river when there's still water in the river. See, look at how fun this was. For us children, it felt like paradise. I also think about our Balikbayan relatives arriving from Canada and California. And of course, I think about Tita Becky's legendary Balikbayan boxes. Inside were treasures from abroad, jeans, shoes, watches, chocolates, and gifts carefully chosen for family members. Somehow, no one was ever forgotten. Everyone received something special. Looking back, those boxes were about much more than material things. They were expressions of love. They were reminders that even when family members lived thousands of miles away, they still thought about us. So this is Tita Becky, Tita Tessie, and Tita Ason. Oh, I think that's Bern. That's Lola Tirsa there. I think about the old house in the bayan where the families of Lola Henyo, Lola Aida, and Lola Nene lived near one another. Visiting meant making the rounds and greeting every elder with a respectful manopo. I think about All Saints' Day at the cemetery. The adults would pray, visit graves, and catch up with relatives, while we children sat nearby, making balls from melted candle wax and playing with our cousins. At the time, it felt like a game. Today, I understand it differently. Those gatherings taught us that family did not begin with us and does not end with us. People often ask me why I became interested in genealogy. The answer begins with my grandmother, whom we lovingly call Nanay Remy. Long before genealogy websites, DNA testing, and online family trees, Nanay Remy was already preserving our family history. She carefully kept large photo albums filled with photographs of relatives, many of whom I've never met. As her first granddaughter, I've spent countless hours sitting beside her while she patiently explained who each person was and how they were connected to our family. She told me about life in Cabiao, about family members who came before us, and about her experiences during the Japanese occupation. Through her stories, I learned that family history is not simply about names and dates, it is about memory, identity, faith, and responsibility. This is a picture of them with Lola Cesar, and this is Lola Felisa. And one of my favorite memories was watching Nane Remy and her Ateng Felisa sit together and talk about the past. If I had owned an iPhone back then, I would have recorded every conversation. what I would give today to hear those stories again in their own voices. Lola Felisa always used the word masiste, masiste. And I think that's her term for being funny or witty. I can stand corrected. So my interest in genealogy also is rooted in my Catholic faith. I believe that praying for the souls in purgatory, especially those who have been forgotten, is one of the greatest acts of charity. When we love those who have passed away, we naturally want to remember them and pray for them. So, in many ways, genealogy restores names to people who might otherwise be forgotten. And I don't want to forget the lolos and lolas. So this is why I'm interested in this. I also began this work for my children, Nathan and Hannah. Like many immigrant families, we crossed an ocean and built a life in America. But I never wanted my children to think that their story began here. I want them to know that before America, before Georgia, and before any of us were born, generations of men and women laid the foundation for our lives through faith, sacrifice, service, and perseverance. Their roots run deep in the soil of Cabiao, Nueva Ecija, and the Philippines. To understand our family, we must first understand Cabiao. Cabiao was originally part of Pampanga before being transferred to Nueva Ecija in 1848. So this is Mount Arayat, and I think this is Lake Nabao. It was a farming community built upon agriculture, faith, and family. Long before paved roads and modern government buildings, its people relied upon the church, the land, and one another. This late 19th or early 20th century photograph captures a rural agricultural scene in Cabiao, where Tagalog and Ilocano farmers are shown preparing the land for sugarcane planting. Actually, not Ilocano. I would think also Kapampangan. Carabaos harnessed to wooden plows methodically break the soil, guided by farmers, walking barefoot across freshly turned earth, an enduring image of pre mechanized Philippine agriculture. At the center of our story stands our great grandparents, Angela Ortiz Luis, Lola Helang, and Gonzalo Monsayac de Leon, Lola Gonzalo. Let's start with Lola Helang. Lola Helang was born on May 31st, 1888, in Cabiao during the final years of Spanish rule in the Philippines. She was only 8 years old when the Philippine Revolution began in 1896. So this is part of my research. This is her baptismal certificate, not certificate, but her baptismal records in the St. John Nepomucene Parish Church. Um, During her lifetime, she witnessed the end of Spanish rule, the arrival of the Americans, the Philippine American War, two world wars, and eventually the birth of an independent Philippine nation. Her life spanned one of the most transformative periods in Philippine history. Angela was the daughter of Don Jose Ortiz Luis and Doña Adriana Alcantara. In Spanish era Philippine society, the titles Don and Doña were reserved for respected members of the community. Family records and church documents indicate that Jose and Adriana were landowners and were frequently selected as sponsors at baptisms and marriages. Again and again, I found their names appearing in church records at important moments in the lives of other families. My mom, Mila, also remembered visiting their graves with Lola Helang within the church grounds of Cabiao, within the walls of St. John Nepomucene. That is a distinction traditionally reserved for important patrons and benefactors of the parish. Their faith was not merely personal, it was woven into the life of the community. But the story reaches back even further. According to family records, Angela's grandfather here. nope, here, was Don Damasio Luis. According to family records, Don Damasio Luis was born on December 10th, 1782. When I first discovered this date, I paused and I tried to imagine the world into which he was born. Don Damasio or Lolo Damasio was born only 6 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence in the United States. The world that he was born in was one of Spanish friars, handwritten church records, horse-drawn travel, and small agricultural settlements scattered across central Luzon. It is astonishing to realize that through him, our documented family history reaches back to more than 240 years. Don Damasio was married to Doña Antonia de Maranan. Their family roots were in Calaba, San Isidro, Nueva Ecija, although they owned extensive agricultural lands in Cabiao. Dalmasio belonged to the prominent Luis clan of Nueva Ecija and was related to Father Leocadio Luis, the priest credited with the establishment of the town of San Antonio, Nueva Ecija. Don Dalmasio himself was a cabeza de barangay. Before Governor General Narciso Claveria's surnamed decree of 1849, the family was known simply as the Luis family. One of the most remarkable discoveries in my research was finding out about the Bisitang Pula or the St. Joseph Chapel, which was built by Don Dalmasio in Pinaglamuan. It was built in 1836 and was rebuilt in 1871 after the earthquake in 1870. There is a document preserved in the National Archives of the Philippines where Don Dalmasio requested permission from the Spanish Governor General to replace the roof of our ermita or chapel that he had built in Barrio Pinaglamuan. At first glance, it appears to be a simple construction request, but it reveals something much deeper. Don Dalmasio invested his own resources and effort to create a place of worship for the people of Cabiao. This chapel served as a mission station for Jesuit priests before the establishment of the parish of St. John Nepomucene. Long before the church became the center of community life, families like the Luis family were helping build the spiritual foundations of Cabiao. Faith was not simply something they practiced, it was something they built. And you know what? This legacy was inherited by Lola Helang and by us. Unknowingly, my mom Mila and my dad Leo carried out this tradition by helping build the Sacred Heart of Jesus Church in Hillsboro, Alabang. Both my mom and my dad are descendants of Dalmasio Luis. And this is also a reason why I got into genealogy because my mom wanted me to find out how she and my dad were related on the Ortiz Luis side. My mom and dad and all of the other descendants of Don Dalmasio inherited faith, leadership, and a tradition of service to both church and the community. So that was really sweet. And I loved that I was able to find that out. So our next one is on Lolo Gonzalo. Uh, Gonzalo Monsayac de Leon also came from another respected Cabiao family. This is his picture. Lola Gonzalo was born on November 25, 1885, to Don Francisco Villaseñor de Leon and Doña Antonia de los Santos Monsayac. This is his baptismal record on the National Shrine of Divina Pastora in Gapan. Like Lola Helang, Lola Gonzalo grew up during a time of tremendous change. As a young boy, he witnessed the Philippine Revolution, the Declaration of Independence, and the Philippine American War. His family was known for education. Family records suggest that Francisco Villaseñor de Leon was a teacher and Lola Gonzalo followed in his father's footsteps. At a time when education was becoming one of the most powerful tools for nation building, Lolo Gonzalo dedicated himself to learning, teaching, and public service. His commitment eventually led him into government. In 1918, at approximately 32 years of age, Lolo Gonzalo became municipal president of Cabiao, the position now known as mayor. During his administration, the first municipal hall of Cabiao was constructed. This was more than a government building. It represented Cabiao's growth into a modern municipality with its own civic identity and institutions. There was also a historical record that showed that Lolo Gonzalo served as a legal guardian for a minor and managing property on the child's behalf. And that demonstrates the trust and confidence that the community placed in him. I have to find that document and I will share it with you. This is a picture of young Tito Doc Jojo Di Maano with Lola Gonzalo at the old house. One person who left a lasting influence on future generations was Lola Gonzalo's mother, Antonia de los Santos Monsayak, whom the family lovingly called Lola Toning. My mom Mila told me that Nane Remy was especially close to her paternal grandmother Lola Toning and spent much of her childhood with her. So as I was working the family history, I found myself thinking often about Nane Remy because I was very, very close to her. I wear her earrings every day because she was so kind and generous, and wearing her earrings reminds me to always do the kind thing. So Lala Remy was not simply just my grandma, she was my storyteller. She was my connection to the past. And in many ways, she's the reason this project exists at all. So my mom shared with me that Nani Remy was, because they were so close, that detail shared stayed with me. And it made me wonder, was the way Nani Remy loved me uh, shaped by the way that Lola Tuning loved her? So was her patience in telling stories learned from sitting beside her grandma and her Lola as a little girl? And did her determination to preserve history and photographs, remember the names, and keep family memories alive begin with the stories she first heard from Lola Taning? Of course, we can't know for certain, but I'd like to think so. I'd like to think that she passed on this love to me because of her closeness with her Lola. So perhaps, you know, because my Lola helped, Nanay helped me understand where I came from. That's what what I received from her was a lasting inheritance, more than money, more than land. What I received was family information. Because history often remembers mayors, judges, heroes, public officials, but family history reminds us that grandparents often leave the deepest imprints of all. So, when Lola Helang and Lola Gonzalo were married on April 7, 1910, the Philippines was entering a new era. So I said that Spanish rule just ended. Um, the Philippine American War had largely subsided. Public schools were expanding. Local governments were being reorganized, and communities such as Cabiao was adapting to life under the American colonial government. As a young couple, Lola Angela and Lolo Gonzalo began building their family during a period of tremendous change and opportunity. So I try to imagine what their lives must have been like. Um, they were not yet the respected elders whose name appears in many family records. During this time, they were simply just a young husband and wife building a home, raising children, and practicing their faith and trying to create a better future for their family. This is the baptismal record of Lolo Henyo. Lolo Henyo was born on November 15, 1911, and was baptized at St. John Nepomucene on January 28, 1912. Lola Felisa followed on January 14, 1914. and was baptized on February 11, 1914. Remedios, my beloved Nane Remy, was born on January 16, 1916, and baptized on February 29, 1916. She was baptized on a leap year, on leap day. And Lola Tirso followed on September 24th, 1917, and was baptized on November 4, 1917. As I show you these baptismal records, I am reminded that they tell us so much more than birth dates. Each record carefully identifies the child's parents, here Gonzalo and Angela, and then also preserves the name of the grandparents, Francisco, where is Lola Francisco, and Antonia Monsayak, and also the paternal grandparents, Jose and Adriana Alcantara. More than 100 years later, those same records allow us to reconnect the branches of our family tree and remember the people whose lives made ours possible. What moves me most is that all four children, actually all nine children, were baptized at the Cabiao Church. That is the same parish that whose roots trace back to the early Catholic community that families like the Luis family helped support generations earlier. It is also a reminder that faith connected these generations long before any of us were born. So, in time, Angela and Gonzalo's family would grow to nine children. Together, they raised a remarkable generation. Lola Henyo became a judge and is known as Judge Eugenio O. De Leon. Lola Felisa became a successful dressmaker and entrepreneur whose generosity helped educate her siblings and many relatives. Tito Cap told me that their house in on Yanko Street in Tondo was the house that everybody stayed in whenever they came to Manila from Cabiao. And, they opened their home to all the family members. And I think Lolo Cesar stayed there while he was going to school for accountancy, as well as Lolo Nene. Um, uh, and then Nani Remedios was educated at the Philippine Normal University and became the head teacher at San Fernando Norte Elementary School. She taught fourth grade, and my nanay taught all of us handwriting. And it's so funny because right now I'm an occupational therapist, and handwriting and fine motor skills is one of the things that I teach on a daily basis. So that's me repeating a family history. Lolo Tirso, or attorney Tirso de Leon, became a lawyer, and I think he survived the Bataan Death March with Lolo Itong. Lola Francisco, or Lola Paco, migrated with Lola Dory to Mississauga, Canada, and established the De Leon clan in Mississauga. Lola Itong, or Colonel Sixto O. De Leon, became a military officer, teacher, author, and assistant director of the National Bureau of Investigation. Lola Nene, or Angelina, helped with Lola Felice's dressmaking business. Lola Cesar became an accountant and later settled with his family in Hawaii. And Lola Aida, or Zenaida, continued the family tradition, being a teacher in Cabiao. Looking at their lives, a pattern begins to emerge. Again and again, we find teachers, we find public servants, we find people who dedicated themselves to helping others. Education, faith, leadership, generosity, service. As I go through our family history, these values appear repeatedly throughout the generations. I love this photo. I think this was taken at the poultry in San Roque. And that's when we had the family reunion. I think this was one of the last family reunions where all nine siblings were alive. So, I talked about my nanay again. And I really connected, my family history because my research because of her. When you're doing the family research, you are reminded of all of those happy memories that you had in your childhood. And um, this was a photo of, like, one of their Rotary Club events. This was a Christmas event. And that was me right there. And my Kuya Richie. That's Tito Rick and that's Tita Tessie. So here is our family picture. And like what I said, I what I inherited from Nanay and from my family is an inheritance of memory, an inheritance of love, of responsibility, the responsibility to remember, the responsibility to tell the stories, and the responsibility to pass them on. And now, as I share these stories with Nathan and Hannah, perhaps all of them are still with us, not through our family tree and not just through photographs, but through the love, faith, values, and memories that continue to flow from one generation to another. So, my hope is that this presentation encourages each of you to share your own memories of the De Leon family. I've been texting and I've been messaging a lot of the titas and titas to give me an idea of how the lolas and lolas were like, of how their lives were like, so that we can keep this as this is our family treasure and we can pass this on to our children. So, I ask you to tell your stories. Please, please share your photographs with us. Look at this. This is like a photo of, I think this is Tito Jojo again. And see how people like to take photos beside their TV, because having a TV is such a big deal that you have to take a picture in front of it. I ask you to write down your memories. This is Tita Emmy's debut with her cousins. This is um, Tita Tessie, Tita Ason, Tita Becky, that's Tita Marcia, and that's my mom, Mila. I don't know if this is the house, if this is Lola Tirso. No, this is not Lola Tirso's house. This must be the house in Tondo, Lola Felisa's house. And I want you to, if you remember what this is, I want you to tell them to us. Tell them to your children. Tell them to your grandchildren. This is a photo. I use kind of AI of, like, an old photo of the cousins. Now they're the titas. And this is one of Lola Pasita and Lolo Itong. This was our old house in Canto in San Fernando Norte, and that, I think, is Lola Cesar. I don't know if that is Kuya CJ. Likely that is, because that's Lola Hining. So if we continue to tell the stories, remember the stories, and pass them on, then the legacy of the De Leon family will never be forgotten. Thank you so much for listening to my and watching my short video. I'm really hoping that we could do more to share about our family. Thanks.